Did you know that there are nuts you've been eating for years that are now sending the wrong signal to your muscles? I'm not just talking about tired legs, I'm talking about something deeper than that. I'm talking about being able to dress yourself in the mornings, to climb the stairs in your own house without having to stop halfway, to get up from a chair without needing someone to help you. That independence you take for granted until the day you start to lose it little by little. Today, I'm going to reveal 5 nuts that protect exactly that and 5 that are silently destroying it. And I'll tell you something important. The third one that's harmful is consumed by 90.2% of adults over 60 without them even realizing it. Stay until the end, because the last 2 I'm going to show you are the ones that confuse my patients the most and cause the most damage, precisely because of that. Throughout my years of working with adults aged 50 to 75, I've developed what I call the 5+655 nuts protocol that you should incorporate into your routine, and 5 that you should learn to identify and eliminate. I designed it specifically with muscles after 60 in mind, because muscles at this stage of life need different signals than those of a 30-year-old. And the most important thing I want you to understand before we begin is this: muscles don't lose strength due to age. They lose it due to a lack of strategic signals. We're not talking about bodybuilding. We're talking about maintaining independence, about continuing to be yourself in your own home, in your own life. Let's start with the 5 that protect. The first nut in the 5 in 5 protocol is one that many people don't consume daily. But from a muscular point of view, it's perhaps the most strategic of all: the Brazil nut. Let me describe it, because I know that in different regions of Mexico and Latin America, it has different names and it's not always easy to identify. It's big, really big. Much bigger than an almond or a common walnut. It has a hard, dark brown, almost black shell, and an oval shape. A single nut is about the size of your thumb. Inside, it's light cream in color with a firm yet smooth texture. In Mexico, you can find it as Brazil nut, or simply as Brazil nut in supermarkets and natural product stores. If you've seen it on the shelf and never bought it, today you'll understand why you should. Now then, why is it so important for your muscles? Many patients tell me, "Doctor, I eat well and walk a bit, but it takes me longer and longer to recover. I used to walk for 20 minutes and the next day I was fine. Now it's much harder." And almost always my answer is the same. You're probably lacking a mineral that almost no one mentions, that almost no one has on their radar: selenium. And what exactly does selenium do? Let me explain with a simple image. Imagine an electrical cable. The cable conducts current, we all know that. But what makes it work well is the coating that protects it on the outside. Without that coating, the current still passes through, but with losses, with friction, with progressive damage inside the cable. The same thing happens with muscle fibers when selenium is low. They work, yes, but with accelerated wear and tear that, over the years, this leads to a loss of strength, slower recovery, and that feeling that the body no longer responds the same as before. Selenium acts as a protective coating, neutralizing the free radicals that attack the membranes of muscle cells. When muscles have adequate selenium levels, the fibers remain more stable, recover better after exertion, and can maintain their strength for longer. I remember Don Ernesto, 70 years old, here in Mexico City. He came to me worried, saying, "Doctor, I feel like my legs don't respond like they used to. I walk very little and I'm already tired." It wasn't like this before. Today we calmly reviewed his diet. He ate protein and vegetables and walked every day, but selenium was practically absent from his diet, completely off the radar. I proposed something very simple. I didn't change his entire diet, nor did I give him complicated supplements. I simply asked him to add 2 Brazil nuts every morning, along with his usual breakfast. After 3 weeks, he returned to the office, and the first thing he told me was, "Doctor, it's not so hard for me to recover after walking anymore." That's what happens when the muscle receives the necessary nutrients. Sometimes what you need doesn't require a huge change. Sometimes you need a sign that's been missing for years. 1 or 2 Brazil nuts in the morning is enough. No more, just plain, no added salt, 2 without sugar. And if you can have them with your breakfast, even better. The second nut in the 5-step protocol is one that many people know by name, but it rarely appears in the weekly shopping list. The macadamia nut is small and round, light cream-colored, with a particularly smooth and creamy texture unlike any other nut. If you've ever tasted one, you'll remember it exactly because of that characteristic, almost buttery texture. In Mexico, you'll find it in natural product stores, in some well-stocked supermarkets, and in specialty markets. It's not as easy to find as almonds or walnuts. That's true, but when you understand why I include it in the protocol, it will be worth seeking it out. What makes it different for muscles after 60? Nothing. Hello, many patients tell me, Doctor, I don't have any specific pain, but in the mornings my body feels stiff. It takes me a while to loosen up and feel like myself again. Isn't that simply inevitable aging? In many cases, it's what doctors call chronic low-grade inflammation. It's not visible inflammation, like when you get hurt. It's something much quieter that slowly settles in the tissues and directly affects how the muscle functions. Let me show you an image so you can see. Let's be clear, a chronically inflamed muscle is like an engine, trying to work without oil. It doesn't break down suddenly, it keeps running, but it wears out much faster than it should. The parts generate more friction against each other, performance drops, and over the years, that accumulated wear and tear becomes a loss of muscle mass, slower recovery, and fatigue that appears sooner than expected. Macadamia nuts are extraordinarily rich in oleic acid, the same fat found in olive oil that makes it so valuable for health. This oleic acid acts like the oil that engine is missing. It doesn't eliminate inflammation overnight. Nutrition doesn't work that way, but it does create an internal environment where the muscle can work with much less friction, where the muscle fibers have more space to function, repair themselves, and maintain themselves. Today I remember Doña Carmen, 68 years old, here in Mexico. She told me that her legs tired too quickly during the day. There wasn't a serious problem in the tests, no specific disease, but we did observe something very common, a diet loaded with refined oils, a lot of processed food, and very little fat. For a healthy lifestyle, I suggested a simple adjustment. Among other changes, incorporate a small handful of natural macadamia nuts each day. She told me she felt lighter when walking and that fatigue didn't appear as quickly. It wasn't a miraculous overnight change. It was a gradual improvement. That's how strategic nutrition works. A small handful, 8 to 10 natural pieces, without added oils or excessive salt. That's all you need. Now I want to tell you about a small nut that many people use only as a cooking ingredient, without knowing that it can do something very interesting for circulation to your muscles. Pine nuts. They are small, elongated, and creamy white, about the size of a long grain of rice. In Mexico, you'll find them in markets, well-stocked grocery stores, and natural product stores. They are also known as pine seeds because that's exactly what they are, seeds extracted from pine cones. They are the same ones used in salads and some Mediterranean dishes. Perhaps you've seen them many times and never considered them beyond the kitchen. Today that changes. Why do they matter for your muscles? Many patients tell me, Doctor, it's not that I can't walk, it's that my legs feel heavy at the end of the day, and my hands lose strength sooner than before. It's harder to open jars, to hold things. That very specific feeling of heaviness that appears gradually throughout the day. In many cases, it's not direct muscle weakness. It's a circulation problem. The muscle isn't receiving the blood flow it needs to work comfortably. And what do pine nuts have to do with that? Pine nuts contain a significant amount of an amino acid called arginine. Arginine is the material the body uses to make nitric oxide, a molecule that acts as a messenger within the circulatory system. And what exactly does nitric oxide do? Something fundamental. It relaxes and dilates blood vessels. When the vessels dilate, blood can circulate more easily, reaching the tissues that need it more efficiently. More oxygen to the muscles, more nutrients, better elimination of metabolic waste, which otherwise accumulates and generates that feeling of heaviness. Don Carlos, 66 years old, told me exactly that. Heavy legs at the end of the day, hands that lost strength. Before, there wasn't a serious diagnosis, but there was circulation that wasn't as efficient as it used to be. 40 years old. Among several adjustments to her diet, I suggested incorporating pine nuts into her salads and some meals. During the weeks later, she told me something simple but very significant. Hello, doctor. I feel that my legs respond better when I walk. It wasn't an overnight transformation. It was a progressive improvement that appeared when the muscle began to receive the blood flow it needed to work properly. A small handful 3 or 4 times a week in salads, soups, or on their own, raw, without excessive toasting. If you've made it this far and want to put the 5+5 protocol into practice, write nuts in the comments. This is how I know that this information reached those who need it. And if you want to continue receiving videos on how to protect your muscles after 60, subscribe and activate the bell. We publish new content every week. Continuing, now I'm going to talk about a nut that many people associate only with desserts, with sweets at fairs, with party tables, pecans. But there's a huge difference between the pecan I'm going to describe now and the one you've probably seen at those candy stands. A difference you'll understand very well in a few minutes. First, the identification. The raw pecan is oval, a little more elongated than a common walnut, light brown on the outside and soft cream on the inside. In Mexico, you can find it as nuez enchilada, imprisoned nut, in some regions, or simply as pecan in supermarkets and natural food stores. It's different from the walnut, although they have some similarities. The important thing is to look for the raw one without any coating. No sugar, no shine, no layer of any kind. Why do I include it in the 5+ and 5 protocols? Because the raw pecan doesn't work on just one front. It works on 3 at the same time. And that's why I call it the repair pillar of Protocol 4. First front, magnesium. This mineral participates in more than 300 reactions within the body, many of them directly related to muscle. Magnesium is what allows muscle fibers to contract and then relax correctly. When magnesium levels are low, very recognizable signs appear. Night cramps that wake you up in the middle of the night, a feeling of stiffness in the legs upon waking in the morning, and muscle fatigue that appears sooner than expected. Second front, zinc. Zinc oversees the repair processes of muscle tissue each time. When you walk, climb stairs, or make any everyday effort, small micro tears occur in the muscle fibers. This is completely normal. That's how muscles work. The body repairs these micro tears, and in this process, the tissue remains functional. Zinc is a key part of this repair mechanism. When zinc levels are low, this repair slows down and the muscle takes longer to recover. The accumulation of this delay over the years contributes to the progressive loss of muscle mass. Thirdly, vitamin E acts as an antioxidant shield directly on the membranes of muscle cells. It protects them from the accumulated damage of free radicals, those unstable molecules that increase with age, stress, and a poor diet. Magnesium, zinc, and vitamin E, all 3 together in a single natural nut. Many patients tell me, "Doctor, I do eat pecans," and I ask them how they eat them. Candied, they say. That's where we need to talk because candied pecans are not the same. They are a completely different food, and I will explain this in detail in the second part of this video because it's more important than it seems. I remember Doña Lupita, 72 years. From Guadalajara, she came to me with frequent nighttime cramps and the feeling that it was becoming increasingly difficult for her to get up in the mornings. In analyzing her diet, we found something very common. She was practically not consuming essential minerals for muscle. Among several adjustments, we incorporated raw pecans regularly. In the following weeks, she reported that the nighttime cramps were becoming less frequent and that getting up in the morning wasn't as difficult. It wasn't overnight. It was gradual, as always, but to one small handful, plain and unsweetened. Without any coating, that's what you need. The fifth nut in the 5+ and 5 protocol is one that many people consume frequently, but almost no one knows exactly why cashews benefit muscles. In Mexico, they are most likely known as caju nuts. In some Central American countries, they are called marañón. They are the same nut, crescent-shaped, creamy white with a smooth texture and very easy to find in supermarkets and convenience stores. The important thing, as always, is to look for natural ones without added salt or industrial oils. Why are they included in the protocol? Over the years, the body gradually loses some of its ability to produce energy within muscle cells. And when cells don't generate energy efficiently, the muscle tires sooner, recovers more slowly, and loses strength more easily. Cashews are especially rich in 2 minerals that work directly in this process. The first is magnesium, which we already know from the previous nut and is fundamental for muscle contraction and relaxation. The second is copper. Copper is a mineral that almost no one talks about when discussing muscles, but it plays a critical role in the processes that allow the mitochondria, the power plants of each cell, to generate energy properly. When the mitochondria are functioning well, the muscle has the fuel it needs to work. When they aren't functioning well, the muscle feels exhausted prematurely. Remember, we're not talking about bodybuilding. We're talking about having enough energy to climb the stairs in your own house without stopping halfway, to carry grocery bags, to continue being yourself in your daily life. Don Roberto, 67 years old, told me that his legs tired too quickly, even with simple things like climbing a flight of stairs or walking a few blocks. There wasn't a serious diagnosis, but his diet was very poor in essential minerals. Among several adjustments, we incorporated natural cashews several times a week. Weeks later, he told me something specific: more stability when walking. Fatigue no longer appeared so early in the day. A small handful 2 or 3 times a week, raw, is good. Those are the 5 nuts that protect your muscles. Now comes the second part of the 5+ and 5 protocol, and this part is the most surprising. To my patients, because we're not talking about obviously bad products. We're talking about products that many people consume believing they're doing something good. Many patients come to the office convinced they're doing everything right, doctor. I don't even eat junk food anymore, they say. Just chocolate-covered nuts to have something nutritious in the afternoon. And that's where we need to sit down and talk calmly. The problem isn't the nuts themselves. The problem is what's surrounding them. When we review the labels of these products together, we almost always find the same things: highly sugary chocolate, sweet coatings, glucose syrup, added sugar, refined oils. The nut, which was originally healthy, ends up submerged in a mixture that the body processes very differently. And what exactly happens? When the body receives large amounts of sugar in a short time, the blood glucose level rises rapidly. The body responds by releasing insulin to stabilize it. This mechanism is normal when it occurs occasionally. The problem arises when this constant cycle of rising and falling glucose is repeated day after day. It generates what doctors call chronic low-grade inflammation, and muscle tissue is especially sensitive to this inflammatory environment. When the body lives in that state, muscle regeneration processes become less efficient. The fibers take longer to repair. Muscle loses its ability to maintain its mass more easily, and I remember Doña Rosario, 68 years old. Every afternoon, she ate a handful of mixed nuts with chocolate, convinced it was a healthy snack. When we checked the label together, we discovered that almost half of what she was consuming was added sugar. We made a simple change. We replaced that mix with plain, natural nuts. After a few weeks, she told me she felt less fatigued in the afternoons, and that her energy remained more stable throughout the day. A small change, a real impact. The substitution is simple: plain nuts alone or combined with a small piece of fruit if you need something more satisfying. This is the conversation I have most often in my practice, and it's the one I want you to listen to carefully. Doctor, I do eat candied almonds, yes, but they're still almonds. No, they're not the same almonds anymore. Let me explain why the natural almond, in its original state, is one of the most complete nuts there is. It provides vegetable protein, vitamin E, magnesium, and healthy fats. All of that is there in the raw almond. But when that same almond undergoes the caramelization process, cooking with large quantities of sugar at very high temperatures to form that crunchy, sweet layer, something happens that fundamentally changes its composition when the sugar is heated in that way. In contact with the proteins and fats of the food, compounds called advanced glycation end products, AGEs, are formed. In the scientific field, we know them as AGPs. What do these compounds do in the body? They accumulate in tissues like rust on a piece of metal. They don't destroy the tissue all at once. They degrade it slowly. And among the tissues where the body accumulates them the most are precisely the proteins of the muscle, the very ones that allow contraction, strength, and movement. Over time, this accumulation contributes to the muscle losing elasticity, regenerative capacity, and metabolic efficiency. Furthermore, the sugar in candied almonds can, in some cases, represent almost half the total weight of the product. This means that what seems like a small, nutritious snack provides a quantity of simple sugars that the body doesn't need, and that triggers the same cycle of glucose spikes and inflammation that we just described. Don Jesus. At 72 years old, he had the habit of eating a small handful of candied almonds after dinner. For him, it was simply an occasional treat, something he had been doing for years. When we reviewed his diet in detail, that small treat contributed a considerable amount of sugar each day. We changed that habit to natural or lightly roasted almonds without sugar. Over time, he noticed less heaviness after meals and more stable energy in the morning. The substitution is exact. 2 natural almonds, the same almonds without the sugar coating. Doctor, I always take my honey-coated peanuts with me when I go for walks to have energy during the day. Excellent intention, terrible product execution. When we reviewed the label of those honey-coated peanuts sold in supermarkets, the peanut almost disappeared behind what surrounded it: refined sugar, industrial syrups, processed honey, starches, and added oils, all to create that sweet and crunchy coating that is so appealing. The problem is twofold. On the one hand, the sugar load generates the same cycle you already know: glucose spike, insulin crash, inflammation. Many people feel it very clearly after eating these types of snacks. A rapid increase in energy followed by a sudden drop in fatigue. This isn't real energy. It's a metabolic cycle that the muscles pay for dearly over time. Furthermore, in many cases, peanuts are fried at very high temperatures before the sweet coating is applied, sometimes in refined oils. This process can generate oxidative compounds that add additional stress on muscle cells, and when muscle lives in an environment of constant inflammation and oxidation, its ability to maintain strength and endurance progressively decreases. Don Manuel, 69 years old, always carried his little bag of honey-coated peanuts when he went for walks. He was convinced it was a healthy way to stay energized. When we checked the label together, we were surprised to discover that much of what he was consuming wasn't natural honey but added sugar and syrups. He switched to plain peanuts. Weeks later, he told me his energy felt more stable throughout the day, without that sudden drop in fatigue in the afternoons. The substitution: plain or roasted peanuts without honey, alone or mixed with other natural nuts. Pistachios have a well-earned reputation. They are naturally rich in healthy fats, plant-based protein, potassium, and magnesium. All of that is true. But there is a version that many people consume thinking it's practically the same: flavored pistachios, barbecue, chili, cheese. Artificial spice blends are not the same, but to achieve those intense flavors, manufacturers add large amounts of sodium, hidden sugars, refined oils, colorings, and flavor enhancers, and that's where the specific problem with this product arises. A different issue than the previous ones appears. Muscles depend on a very precise balance between four minerals: sodium, potassium, calcium, and magnesium. These four work together to allow muscle fibers to contract and relax in a coordinated manner. When one of them is in excess, that balance is disrupted. And in the case of highly flavored pistachios, frequent consumption can lead to a high sodium intake that often goes completely unnoticed because it's consumed in small amounts throughout the day as if it were insignificant. Over time, this excess sodium can promote fluid retention, resulting in more swollen legs at the end of the day and more frequent nighttime cramps. When circulation is affected by this condition, muscles receive less oxygen and fewer nutrients. Their ability to recover after exertion decreases, and their strength also diminishes over time. Furthermore, the flavor enhancers are designed to make the product difficult to consume in moderation. Many people start with a small handful and, without realizing it, consume a significant amount. They end up eating much larger quantities, more hate, more additives, more imbalance. Don Hector, 68 years old, barbecue-flavored pistachios. Every afternoon while watching television, for him, it was a small, unimportant snack. When we checked the label, the sodium per serving was considerable. I suggested he switch to natural pistachios, lightly roasted, without added salt. After a few weeks, he noticed less swelling in his legs at the end of the day and less frequent nighttime cramps. The substitution is exact: natural or lightly roasted pistachios without salt or flavorings. This last point is different from the previous ones. We're not talking about a product with a specific name. We're talking about a process that can silently ruin any nut that was originally perfectly healthy. Excessive roasting. Many patients tell me, "Doctor, I eat natural nuts." And I ask them, do you like them very roasted or not? Do you like them very crunchy and dark? Therein may lie part of the problem that we hadn't identified. What exactly happens with very intense heat? The fats that nuts contain in their natural state are mostly healthy. When exposed to very high temperatures for too long, they begin to oxidize. When these fats oxidize, they transform into compounds that the body must neutralize. This increases the internal oxidative stress load, and oxidative stress is precisely one of the factors that most contributes to the progressive deterioration of muscle tissue with age. There's something else. Very intense roasting not only affects the fats, but also reduces the natural antioxidants that these same nuts contain, the very compounds that should protect muscle cells. So, the food that originally could help protect muscle ends up offering less benefit than it had, and also adding an oxidative load that the body doesn't. The practical sign you need is simple. Look for a light golden color, not dark brown. If the nut smells bitter or is very dark, it's too heavily roasted. A light roast is fine. It improves the flavor without compromising the nutrients. The problem is excess. You don't need to eliminate all roasted nuts. You need to learn how to choose them. Before finishing, I want to leave you with the 5+ and 5 clear protocols in one place, so you don't have to look for anything again. The 5 that protect your muscles. Brazil nuts, 1 or 2 in the morning. Selenium protects muscle cells from oxidative damage. Macadamia nuts, a small handful. Oleic acid reduces internal inflammation that breaks down muscle. Pine nuts, a handful 3 or 4 times a week. Arginine improves circulation to muscle tissue. Raw pecans, a small handful, natural. Magnesium, zinc, and vitamin E. the building block of repair. Natural cashews, a handful 2 or 3 times a week. Magnesium and copper provide cellular energy for muscle. The 5 you should identify and eliminate. Mixed nuts with chocolate, candied almonds. Peanuts with processed honey, flavored pistachios, and dark-colored ultra-roasted nuts. The rule that sums it all up. Natural, yes. Processed, no. If it has a sweet coating, artificial flavoring, or a very dark color, it's no longer the same food, regardless of the label. If you consistently incorporate the 5+5 protocol, you can start to notice concrete changes. Firmer legs and arms when walking, better stability when climbing stairs, faster recovery after the day's activity, and that energy that used to disappear by mid-afternoon. More stable, more consistent, more yours. Not because these nuts are miraculous, but because you're finally giving your muscles the signal they need, instead of the incorrect signals that were wearing them down without you even knowing. It's not magic. It's a strategy applied intelligently and consistently. Share this video on WhatsApp with a family member or friend over 60. Sometimes the right information arrives just in time. Discover how you should eat flaxseed to activate the muscle protection signal. Click here. See you in the next one.